Hey, this is episode number 11 of the Future Steps Creative Podcast with Marlon McPherson, yours truly, your host. And in this one, we're going to talk about productivity, following on from last episode. We talked about doing the work and what it actually means to do the work in the context of our online businesses, or in the context of setting up as an entrepreneur or growing your business. So, we all know what that means to do the work. Now, the problem with that is that if we don't know what work we need to be focused on, if you haven't listened to that episode, go ahead and listen to it. That was episode number 10. You can go to marlonmcpherson.com/10, 010, I think it says on that one, to listen to it. So this episode is going to tackle how we set goals and prioritize. So it's about goal setting and prioritization. If we don't know what our goals are, what we're trying to work towards, and then what steps needs to be taken to get there, then we might have a problem with actually doing the work and prioritizing and making sure that we're doing the right things at the right time. So that's what this episode is all about today. Hopefully I can bring you some value on this topic. So I want to say that setting goals effectively requires you to have a certain set of things that you actually have within the process of setting a goal. And I'm going to look into what those things are. So some ground rules. So there's a few rules when it comes onto goal setting, as I've just mentioned. The first one is to really have a timeline. So the goal must be time bound, which means that you're going to set a deadline for it. So it can be a longer or a shorter deadline. It's up to you to know that you're setting a reasonable amount of time for you to accomplish that particular goal. Some goals might depend on other things happening. So then it's a fixed time that you need to be, that you've got to actually accomplish what you need to accomplish. But other goals that are down to you is something that you need to set the time for. Now, where you need to be careful with that is you don't want to set a goal too far ahead into the future or give yourself too much time, because what ends up happening quite possibly is that you then think, oh, I've got all this time in the world, and you then procrastinate or you give yourself way too much time. So then by the time you do accomplish the goal, then it's not as effective as if you were to do it more quickly, because opportunities might have passed you or things may have just moved on since then. And conversely, you don't want to do too short a time as well, because then you are putting yourself under too much pressure and you might not realistically be able to complete your goal. The second thing is that your goal needs to be measurable. Being measurable means that you can then track your progress. You can know if you need to step things up. If you don't have any sort of metric that you're looking at to measure how well you're doing with your goal, then it's kind of impossible. We don't have the same motivation if we don't think that we're making progress or see that we're making progress as human beings. So it's really good to have some sort of way to see what you're doing and to measure that, to make sure that you can always stay on track and you're exactly where you need to be or ahead of where you need to be, but not falling behind. But even if you're falling behind, at least you know, so you can start stepping things up and tackling the things that you need to tackle. And it gives you some sense of urgency when you can see that, okay, I'm falling behind. The third rule that I'm going to say is it has to be actionable. And what I mean by it being actionable is that we need to avoid overwhelm. In order to avoid overwhelm, we need to make sure that what we're choosing to do is actually something that we can manage. And a great way to look at this is by using the concept of chunking, which Tony Robbins talks about, where there's the concept of taking lots of information that's coming at you, and you, because there's so much information, you get overwhelmed by it. So then what you can do is break them down into smaller groups of related things. And these smaller groups of related things, you can deal with one group at a time. And then it makes it easier for you to then tackle them and get a step further towards the bigger goal. So rather than trying to attack everything all at once and being all over the place, you take it step by step. So that's what chunking is all about. And I think that's a really powerful system you can utilize, not just in goal setting, but just in everything that you're doing, whether that's in your personal life or in your business. You can take steps to break things down and then put them into manageable, more bite-sized chunks that you can take action on more easily. So now that we understand what those ground rules are in terms of how you effectively set goals, I'm going to talk about the planning aspect of it and the prioritization of it, and see how that ties in with setting up an online business or growing an online business. So one thing that we have to do is to know what to work on and when to work on them. And we need to identify milestones and subsequent activities. So what I mean by that is a milestone is a portion of a part of a goal that you need to get to before you can go on to that next section. So let's say you take a full goal and you decide that you can break it down into 5 chunks. You can then identify what each chunk represents and what activities come under each chunk for you to then execute on in order for you to complete that milestone before you move on to the next one. If that doesn't really make too much sense to you, hopefully my next, what I'm about to explain is going to help you understand it a bit better in terms of how an online business is actually typically set up. So as we said, we have to take a closer look at the actions. And when we take a closer look at the actions, we can kind of map out the journey and see exactly what we need to do on a day-to-day basis or on a monthly or a weekly basis to get ourselves closer to our goals. So we need to write them down, which is, for a start, when we write things down, we can actually see them more clearly, not just visually, but we can kind of think more clearly as well. And we're more likely to take action on the things that we've written down. I write a lot of things digitally, but sometimes I have a notebook as well. I always have my notebook with me, but sometimes I write things inside my notebook first, and then I transfer all these ideas into the written form in terms of what things I need to do, my to-do list. I transfer them to Trello or to whichever app I'm using for my project management at any given time. So this gives me a way of mentally absorbing the information. And when I have downtime, my brain is actually working behind the scenes to make sense of things that I'm trying to work through, because I've actually used my my physical self to write them down and to actually type them in as well into my note-taking app. All right, so here's an example of some milestones that you would set up in a typical, or milestones you'd need to hit in a typical online business setup. So say you are just starting out, you want to build an online business. The first thing that I would usually say is that you need to start with an audience. You need to start building an audience. Some people might actually jump in and start with going straight to the product phase, where they think of an idea and they think, okay, great, this is going to be my product, and I'll go and build it and find someone to sell it to. But the best way is to actually start with an audience, and within the audience building phase, there are a few things that you need to do before you then move on to the product development. And that has its own set of things that's involved with the product development process. And then you have the marketing and sales aspect of it in order to sell your product and to find customers as well. So I've just got some examples here, just to name a few. On the building an audience, first thing that you would usually do to break it down is to pick a niche. So that's one task or one other thing, subcategory. Then you'd need to identify the needs of the people within that task, what problems they're facing, what's their pain points, in order for you to then be able to decide how you can help them. How you can help is going to come in different ways. But typically online, you're talking about putting out content that is going to be consumed easily by them, free content, This could be written content, or you could do something like what I'm doing now, podcast or videos, where people can actually get some small win and get them closer to their goal as the consumer within that particular niche that you're working with. Over time, because you're creating value and you're continuing to provide value to this niche, you would have built up some sort of following or built up some sort of authority, trust factor, likability factor, and people would know you within that niche. At that point, you have an audience that you can start selling things to, you can start creating paid products for. So the next phase logically would be then to do product development. You might want to just put a product out at this point, but the best way is to actually try to work with your audience or a few people within your audience to figure out how you can develop the product to suit their needs the best way possible. And once you've got something out, they can test it. You can go through the process with them and you can validate if someone is going to buy this product or not. Is it worth the hassle? Before you spend a lot of money on it, before you spend a lot of time developing it, you need to do a lot of surveys or prototyping to make sure that this is something that you are going to get a good return on your investment from. So as you can see, I've got listed out there, you need to come up with product ideas, and then validation and testing are two things that you would need to look at as well. So these are just a few examples, like I said to you. Once you've got that product that you think is going to resonate best with your audience because you've already gone through the process of doing, beta testing or just making sure that it's something that's going to hit the spot. You need to now market that product, and you need to find other people just like the people in your audience. You need to sell to your audience, and you need to find new people. So you need to do marketing and sales. And what that means is that you're going to need some sort of website funnel for your marketing and your sales. And in other words, you'll need a website, things like a shopping cart. You'd need an email marketing service or an email campaign, and you'll need to create more content. So these are ways in which you can then put together your marketing and sales funnel to make sure that you're now making sales and you're attracting people into your business on an ongoing basis. And you can tweak and continue to develop your product to make it better over time. And eventually, when you have settled into that product, you can decide to go to the product number 2, product number 3, and so on and so forth. So this is just a brief synopsis of, like I said, what an online business could look like or the process behind it. So the big goal here is to build a successful online business. But what we've done is we've chunked it down into 3 chunks, which I call milestones. And these milestones have tasks or activities within them that you need to complete. These are obviously not comprehensive, but it gives you a good idea of the things that you'd need to go through in your categorizations and your breaking down of tasks. I've already done an episode about managing tasks, I believe. So if you just check back in the archive of my episodes, I spoke about Trello, which is an app that I use currently for managing my content and also for planning things like the podcast. Well, obviously the podcast is content, but you can use it for planning products or managing projects of any sort as well. You can collaborate with other people. So that's a great way for you to maybe document your process and document the steps that you need to take to get to your goal. However, if you're looking for something that's going to be better able to help you, plug, I have a brand strategy guide, which is a DIY guide, and that has a section in there where you can actually do a goal setting. You can fill out a goal setting worksheet and plan through how to prioritize. And what I have in there is a worksheet that allows you to list out your tasks. And in order to decide on which one is most important, you give it a score. So you would have, let's say, 2 types of scores for each thing. You'd have one which is going to say how important this is in terms of the return that it's going to give you. What's the importance of this particular task? So if it's very important and it's going to have a high impact, that's the word I'm looking for. If it has a high impact, then you give it a high score, and it's out of 10. And the next score is the doability, how easy it is to execute on it right now. So if it's something that's easy to do, then you give it a high score as well. If it's very difficult to do right now, give it a low score. And then you tally them up, and whichever has the highest score in both categories combined, then you know you need to work on those, because the ones that are easy to do now and give you a high impact, then it makes sense. It makes sense to work on those ones first and then go on to the next ones that are lower impact or higher difficulty. To give you an example of that, doing something like, I guess, setting up an email marketing service or signing up for an email marketing service. You have free ones out there that you can easily do. So that's something that's easy to do, and I think it has a high impact. So if you haven't already started an email list, you don't necessarily need a website for this as well, because MailerLite, for example, and MailChimp, they have landing page builders. So you can actually build a landing page that you can send people to directly. It's not as good as having your own website, but it's good for just like having a one-page opt-in where people can sign up, get your freebie, or sign up to just get your newsletter. So that's an easy thing, but it's high impact, and the importance of having an email list is very, very high. So that's something that I would probably start with. Something else like building out a website funnel would be a lot more difficult, even though it's high impact. It's a lot more difficult for you to tackle, or it might be out of your reach right now in terms of working with developers or web designers and that kind of thing. So that could be something that comes secondary, but that hopefully gives you some idea. So you can find that over on futurestepsacademy.com, the DIY brand strategy guide. It has in there basically some activities for you to go through and build out your brand. And it leads into that by talking about goals and how you can do goal setting. And it has that worksheet plus the other worksheets that obviously helps you to build out your brand, as I've mentioned before. I'll leave a link to all these things, anything that I've discussed, inside the description. If you're watching this on YouTube or on some other video platform, I'll leave it in the description. If you're listening on the podcast, audio only version, then you can head over to marlonmcpherson.com. Also look in the description of your app, but look, you can go to marlonmcpherson.com/11, so /11, and you'll get to episode number 11 with all the show notes. So pretty much that's all I've got in terms of how you can set up your goals and prioritize. If you don't have the framework, if you don't have a framework like the one that I've mentioned on Future Steps Academy, you can literally do the same thing on a sheet of paper by listing out all the activities for prioritization and doing 2 columns, one for difficulty and one for impact, and score them out of 10. And the ones that come out on top with the highest scores combined, then you know you need to work on those first. So that's that. Okay, so with that being said, I hope this has brought you some value. If you've got any questions, or if you've got anything that is very specific to your situation, you might have something that you might not be able to apply it to yourself because you don't have, I guess, a good understanding of how it applies to you. Maybe you've gotten the concepts that I'm talking about here, not just in this episode, but in the other episodes as well. There are 2 ways in which you can connect with me if you need some extra help. And these 2 ways are free at the moment. So you can, first of all, head over to marlonmcpherson.com/business checklist, where you can grab hold of my online business checklist that I talk about, things that you can that you need to look at for building your online business. That gets you on my email list, and from there I'll be communicating with you by email. You'll get an automatic email anyway, which you can reply to with the things you're struggling with, and I'll try and respond in the best way possible, as much as I can. If not, then I'll put some content out that is going to tackle the issues, hopefully, that is going to be put forward by you as a struggle. The next way is to join my community on Facebook. It's on Facebook at the moment. I know everyone's not on Facebook, but for now, I have a Facebook group called Future Steps Creative as well. Head over to Facebook groups and search for that. You'll also have a link within somewhere on my website, hopefully. But if not, it will be inside my email messages that go out, my emails that go out when you sign up to the email list. So you can ask questions in there, and there's a few people inside the community at the moment. I will be monitoring it and answering questions within there when I can. Other people in there as well may be able to help out. That's the idea behind it. Hopefully I can grow this to a point where everyone's just helping out each other. So that's all I've got to tell you about for now. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks to everyone that's been listening and been giving me some great feedback on the podcast. If you haven't done so already, I'd like to ask you to head over to iTunes or whichever app you're on, but especially iTunes, and leave a review. Hopefully it's a great review, because that helps with the rating of the show. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great week, and I will speak to you next time. We're going to be talking about funnels. We're going to be talking about marketing and sales funnels. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I'll talk to you about it next time. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.